I think we're seeing the bad effects of coalition government in our area. What has happened is political parties went to canvass late last year for local government elections, and political parties all promised workers that we will fight for your rights. Your increase that was due last year, July, we will fight for it. We will make sure you get this rights vote for us. 2 months ago, at a council meeting, coalition partners voted against the 3.5% increase for workers, and workers took to the streets last week and Tuesday.
Carry on.
So that, in a nutshell, is why we without power. Striking workers went to the streets, and basically we all know the job of any striking worker is to bring its employer or employee to its needs, so that they can get their demands met. And I think this is what has happened. Only this time it went more than just taking things to the street. Striking workers basically sabotaged areas of power. So this is not the power outage is not just something that we experienced in Ward 61 in Lodium, Erasmus, Glorious. This is something we're sitting with areas which are 14 days without power, 11 days without power throughout the city of Tshwane. So
Councillor, all right, let me ask you this question then, Councillor Naeem. Why does it seem as if it is targeted at particular areas only? Example, Lodium and surrounds. Was that deliberate? What about the greater?
Auntie Julia, on this, I think sometimes we as community, we suffer from an inferiority complex. I think it's maybe because of apartheid. And I think this is a reality. I found it in Lens as well. The moment something happens, why only Lens? Why only Lodium? But reality, it's not only Lodium. It's not only black areas. The city of Centurion, which is a lily white area, if you find areas like Valhalla, you find areas like Crenbrook, you find areas, the Reed, for example, are day 8 without power. It's a total white area. So it's not something which is targeted to Lodium. I don't think any mayor or any politician sits in his office and say, oh, we don't like Lodium, switch them off. No, I don't think there's such a system where you have a computer button, oh, we're going to switch Lodium off. What actually happened is that our substations were sabotaged. So right now we have 97% of power restored. The areas that aren't restored are not restored for 2 reasons. One is either cabling was cut, and this was not cabling that was stolen. This was cabling, when people steal cables, obviously you see cable missing. Here, they snip the top, they snip the bottom, so we can't join the two. So it's vandalized, it's not, or sabotage, it's not actually vandalism. In terms of our substations, obviously, council workers are best know the power stations better than anyone else because they work there every day. On Friday, I was at the substation in Lodium, and we found a council Bucky and a council guys working, and I was so happy. I said, finally our power's coming back. And not a few hours later to find out that these workers were actually inside the substation and sabotaged the station. In some mini subs, we found they switched to negative and positive. So instead of power coming in, it was going out. And each substation, they just made things difficult. Once lights were restored after 2 days in most areas, we found it went off after a few hours. And the reason is council workers went, basically snipped wires. They couldn't get into power stations because we secured it. They basically snipped wires and duct cables to make sure that certain areas don't have and make it just most difficult for the council workers that are working to work. And I think people will say to you, where's the security? Where's the army? We need to understand something. Is all security was called in. Your issue is not when they come out to work. The issue is when these council workers get back home. People know where they stay, who they are. The moment photos are taken. And, I think the biggest cause of some of our problems is WhatsApp. Because, a lot of keyboard warriors, the moment you find a council vehicle, hey guys, council vehicle is here. But not realizing that our groups have striking workers, our group has workers that work for municipalities. Groups are not, only friends or family. Most of our groups are open groups for communities. And the moment power is going to come back on, you'll see we have a problem where areas are cut off or vandalism takes place, sabotage takes place. So this was an issue here in Lothian specific that I'm talking about. Vandalism and sabotage took place throughout the city, but we didn't get any violence here like other parts of the city where workers were beaten and sitting in hospital, some fighting for their lives, but lives were threatened.
Okay, so there's a couple of issues that you've thrown out, Councillor Naeem Patel. Number one would be the moment there's a situation like this, downtime as far as electricity and power is concerned, fingers are pointed at you, and obviously the residents demand answers from you, possibly even become aggressive with you because you are representing them. What do you do in a situation like this?
Yeah, I think this was, it was a very difficult first day. Obviously, anyway, and I don't blame residents. We need to understand anybody will be frustrated, especially the fact that we're coming to the month of Ramadan. Most of our Indian housewives, Muslim housewives have already prepared their savories, which runs in the hundreds of dozens per house. So obviously, with no power, your savories are going off, and it's a reality. Thousands of rands were spent, time was spent more than money, and I think the frustration could have been seen. I think one thing I say is us as the Indian community are not very politically astute, and we don't really understand politics and what the function of who is in the government. And I don't blame us because most people don't really care. No, I got this guy representing me. It's his job to sort it out. I think we need to educate people and say, look, the job of a councillor, in one sentence, is basically a liaison officer. He's a liaison between the council and the community. In the old days, maybe 25 years ago, before the new bylaws were passed, the new regulations, a councillor had some power. In today's time, councillors don't have much power. Everything has to go through council. You have to have a resolution. All councillors have to agree. The individual councillor has not much power. But obviously, my job is to fight for the community of Lothian, to put pressure on the mayor, on the officials. It's easy when it's only 1 hour area power outage, but when you have a whole city, obviously you're fighting. Every person is fighting. Every councillor is fighting that his community gets power. And I give an example of this. On Saturday night, we had a team here working and restoring power. At 1 o'clock, we just find the whole team without saying anything, get in their cars and they leave. And I said to the one guy, "What's happening?" "No, we're going to the Reeds." I said, "What are you going to do in the Reeds?" A group of Action SA supporters and a PR councillor came there and said to them, "We will not leave here until you come to the Reeds." Now, understand, even me as a councillor was not allowed to go to a substation because there was supposed to be no attention drawn to council that they're working for fear of life. So nobody knew that they're working, or we didn't put it on any social media at the council. So they were afraid, intimidated, and they had to leave. So everybody, I don't think the Action SA councillor, she got pressure. She's at that time 5 days without power. Her job was, hey, my community is sitting on my head. We don't have power for 5 days, and your Lothian's getting power, and they only offer 4 days. So you find the councillors, officials have to now juggle, hey, I must do this one and this one and this one. So it becomes a problem for everyone when you have power outages or sabotages at this scale. So I agree with the frustration, but I also think we need to be more politically more educate our communities as to how councils run. It's not like, you find the foreign communities, the Pakistani community, tell me, in Pakistan, our council is like is like a minister. He's the mayor of his area. No, so you're the mayor of Lothian. I said, no.
Okay. Okay, Naeem, let's look at the flip side of this issue. We're talking about your duties, that you are in the firing line the moment there's power or other issues in Lothian and surrounding areas. And you are saying this is the direct result this time around because the obviously the staff, council staff, did not receive the pay increases that were promised. They've now protested. they've gone on some sort of action, protest action, and they are damaging very valuable infrastructure. I know this is going to be very difficult, but should council or government be able to pinpoint who the perpetrators are, will action be taken against them? Because we can't allow this type of mindset to prevail in the country. Every time something doesn't go right, we are the protest capital of the world. Every time something does not go right in some specific area, or some need is not met by civil society, then there's a protest action. And in the process, very sadly, valuable money, taxpayers' money, is lost due to very serious damage to infrastructure. So will action be taken against the perpetrators if found out, or do you need real hard evidence?
Julia, I think action will be taken. To what level action will be taken, I cannot answer. I think the city of Tshwane will have to answer that. But I think action has been taken. I think the city council has went to court, taken interdicts. Also, I think they're waiting for a judgment so that the leadership of the striking workers can be arrested. I think to arrest striking workers, it's a bit difficult because obviously these are big unions. You don't know who did what. You'll have to get evidence for that. But in terms of the leadership, it's a bit easier because of incitement and so on. So I think it's important that even workers also understand that we need to come to the negotiating table. We cannot all the time strike. But saying that, we need to go back and look at the history of South Africa. In order for us to have got freedom in 1994, one of the actions that were taken over the 20 years previous to that was obviously strike action, was obviously protest. Mass action was what brought the government to its knees. So we have a population that was brought up from young ages to say, look, if we want anything, the best way to do it is to protest and to bring government to its knees so that we can get what we want. So this is, something which is inborn and in the blood of the masses. And if you see our communities, traditional Indian communities, Lodium land, I think they're following the same route. I was shocked in the last 2 years when we had water outages and when we had power crisis. You find the community of Lodium took to the streets. You had leadership, you had elderly, you had young, all in the street, burning tires, protesting. And the reality is when they went to the streets, they got what they wanted. You'll find last year we had 8 days without power, 8 days without water. Rainwater was blaming the city of Tshwane. City of Tshwane was blaming rainwater. Nobody could give a definite answer. Funny enough, at night, Friday night, the community took to the streets. They burned tires. It was all involving local Indian people. Next morning, miraculously, water came back. So I think we understand, and I don't agree with this, but reality is this is what's working currently for the masses.
All right, let me ask you this question then, finally, to wrap up on the interview. And perhaps this is a question that we need to put to the union leaders. And this is the issue around, yes, I hear what you're saying. Protest action is effective. It seems that only when the people take to the streets does government sit up and take notice, and only then do they wake up to the fact that there is a problem and that the problem needs to be addressed. And we have a deep history of, corruption and everything else that goes into all of where we are today. But I'm just wondering, is there any way where government and union leaders can sit down together and conscientize the workers, the protesting workers, whenever, if ever they take to the streets again, is go ahead with your protest action, but don't damage the infrastructure. We are limping as it is as a country. We can't afford to be fixing damaged infrastructure? Because once again, it is you and I as taxpayers that's paying for that. Is there any way that can happen? A short answer, if you don't mind, because we've run out of time.
I think you made an excellent point, and this is something I put to the community when they wanted to march on Friday. I said to them, look, I agree with protest action, but I don't think with the anger that people are right now, we should protest, because we're only going to damage property that is the infrastructure of the community of Lodium. So Monday morning, you damage the robot. Monday morning, when we got to get back to work, our own robot is damaged. It's not the mayor suffering or the city suffering, it's us as residents. And I think we have to educate. I think in our school system, we're going to have to educate people that protest is a right, but damage to property is a criminal offense.
Absolutely.
I think this is something that it's a crime to damage property, but it's your right to protest. Peaceful protest, make a noise, scream, it's fine.
But stop! You must know. You must know where the cutoff point is. Councillor Naeem Patel, that's where we have to leave it. Just very, very quickly. When do you hope that power will be restored for once and for all? Do you think
97% has been restored?
Okay.
3%. It's going to take a while because the vandalism and the sabotage is to such an extent that the tractors and TLBs have to be brought in, areas dug up, and areas rewired. Obviously, with the strike, you can't come out in the open and do work because people's lives are at stake. So it's going to be a time. I can't say 5 days, 6 days, but it's going to be a while for power to be restored.
And do you think the striking workers will get their demands met in terms of the increases that were promised but were not forthcoming?
Honestly, I think it's a political thing. They won't get their demands met.
Oh, okay, that's where we leave it. Thank you very much for being on the show this morning, Councillor Naeem Patel, Ward 61, obviously servicing the Tshwane area. 9:16 a.m. exactly. News and views on Cllr Media. Still to come on the show, we're going to cross over to Cape Town, the Western Cape. We will be talking with Hussein Shamsuddin, an artist of a very different kind.
World